Hi, I'm Lohbado. I would like to offer a Club Murano reading of The Unnamable by Samuel Beckett. I'm reading it as a connoisseur, as someone who enjoys reading, a bibliophile. It's a rare and unusual book. There's no plot or character development. The novel involves a series of scenes and repetitive motifs, repetitive word structures. An eccentric book. It's for connoisseurs. This is a Lohbado interpretation. Obviously, in a YouTube video, I'm not going to go into a detailed analysis. That would take at least an hour or two. There's a lot of richness in there. There's a lot to explore. There's a lot of humor. It's a very humorous book. In order to keep it short for a YouTube video, I simply tried to give an impression of what it's like to read the book and how it can be an enjoyable experience of dreamlike images and a unique, almost obsessive-compulsive prose style. It was he wrote it in French. Samuel Beckett wrote it. It's called Unnamable. Translated in here into English with the author. And to The Unnamable. It's a collection called 3 novels. This is what it's like in French. It's Molloy, Malone Dies, Malone meurt, and Unnamable. So you have it, the three novels. Historical context. Samuel Beckett was born in Ireland. He moved to France. He wrote in French. He was active in the French Resistance. After the war, he received a medal for his services during the French Resistance. His early novels wrote in English. He began just writing in French and then translating some of them himself. He translated The Unnamable himself into English. And in terms of cultural context, it's introspective literature about looking inward, examining nature of self, the nature of reality, looking at thoughts, trying to understand what's going on. But it's fiction, it's not an essay. Don't read it expecting to know what it means. It's open. It's unnameable. You can't categorize it. You can't put a finger on it. You can't pin it down. Each time you read it, it's like offers a new perspective, like poetry. Previous examples of this type of literature, some famous ones that Beckett refers to in his writing. Ignatius Loyola, Spiritual Exercises. It's one exercise. If you want to see God, just go for a few days without eating or drinking and you'll hear the voice of God or see God. I mention that because the voice is a huge theme, is a motif in The Unnamable. Descartes, so in the 17th century, Cartesian meditation, a very important influence. The setup of someone in the dark. Imagine that you're in a sense deprivation tank. There's no sight. You don't see anything. You can't hear anything. You don't feel anything. How do you know you even exist? But Descartes' conclusion was, I think, therefore I am, the cogito. Whereas Beckett pushes it further in saying, who is this I? And what do you mean by thinking? Another important influence, it was Proust. Beckett actually wrote a book on Proust. Proust à la recherche de temps perdu, In Search of Lost Time, begins with the narrator remembering a dream about waking from a dream and not being sure where he was. Like a kaleidoscope of obscurity, a kind of, he uses the word, a kind of metempsychosis of thoughts. What is The Unnamable all about? What is it all about? What is going on? It's hard to know where to start with this. You could start with a style, repetitive phrases, sometimes the same words repeated over and over again, page after page, or sprinkled throughout the book. Obsessions or motifs, voice, noise, eye, place. In terms of sequence, if this was a theater play, you could think of it in terms of scenes. The first scene is someone in a room hearing a voice, sensing the presence of company, perhaps Malone. Malone happens to be a character from Beckett's previous novel called Malone Dies. He speculates on where exactly is he in the room, somewhere between the center and circumference, the circumference of the orbit of Malone around the narrator. So this goes on for several pages. Someone in a room. Often in Beckett novels it's in the dark, but in this case there's intermittent light. There are lamps, so it's not total darkness, it's gray. After this preamble about identities and the possibilities and voices and how many voices are there, how many possible characters are there, there's an introduction of Mahood and Mahood's stories, his silly stories. The first one could be Returning to the Fold, a story of a mutilated person, maybe someone mutilated in the war. He doesn't say how they were mutilated, but it's someone missing an arm and missing a leg and having one arm, one leg, and one crutch. The crutch supported in the armpit, where just above of the arm with the missing arm, and then kicking the crutch forward with one foot in order to move. And when he wishes to sit down, he drops the crutch and collapses on the ground. And sometimes he wriggles through the mud like a worm. And he's returning home and he arrives in a courtyard and there's peepholes. That's another thing, is holes and eyes and surveillance, being watched, people peeping at him, trying to see what is he doing, what is he doing? It's his family, it's his home. And he hears their death cries. And when he comes in, the place stinks of putrefaction and rot. See, it's like a dream. The sense of time is all not logical. And they're all dead of perhaps eating tainted sausage. They ate a tainted sausage and they all died, and then he proceeds to stomp on them quite angrily, or with emphasis. He stamps on all of his family. And then Mahood kind of says, okay, enough. Next scene, the head in a jar outside a canteen. Mahood is talking about a head in a jar outside a canteen. And the manager or the woman who's running the canteen feeds him, changes the litter, and when it snows or the weather is bad, puts a lid over the jar and decorates the jar with Chinese lanterns and hangs them in the menu next to it, so that the head in a jar becomes like a mascot, trying to attract the attention of customers to look at the menu and then go into the canteen and order. And the woman who manages the canteen feeds the head, changes the litter, and in bad weather puts a lid on it to keep out the snow. And there's a discussion about Worm, the introduction of Worm, who's also in search of a little calm. And Worm is like in a basement or subterranean dwelling where the air is really bad. The air is toxic. And there are people watching through peepholes and trying to get him with hooks to pull him into their air. Worm, literally someone in bad toxic air underground. And eyes, or people peeping through holes, eyes peeping through holes at Worm, poking at him, reaching out with hooks and grapnels. They want to drag him out of his air into their air. All the while this is happening, the narrator just wants to be left alone, wants to rest in peace. But there's a compulsion to keep speaking. It's like a punishment, like a lesson, like a pensum. He must keep speaking. They want something from him. There's always a sense of they. He's being punished. He's a victim. They're the tormentors, and he's trying to please them. He's trying to do whatever it is. He's trying to say something so that they'll be pleased, satisfied, and leave him alone, but he suspects that will never happen, that it will keep going on, that it will never stop. I like to read it often just the way I dream. I don't need to analyze my dream. I don't need to know what the dreams mean. But because the dream has taken the format of a dream to express things that I couldn't express in waking hours. there's no, what would be the point in explaining the dream? If it can be explained, then just give me an explanation without the dream. If there's something you need to say, then just tell me without going through this arduous task of dreaming. So that's how I enjoy reading. That's how I enjoy reading The Unnamable, taking it at face value. As a connoisseur, I just read it and marvel at the prose style, at the dreamlike sequence of images, and it has a strange effect. Maybe analogy of how I enjoy it would be to say that I enjoy this book the way I would enjoy listening to music. For example, Well-Tempered Clavier by Bach. I just sit back and enjoy it. I don't say, what does the music mean? With Beckett, it's the experience of reading it, and it stimulates the mind, imagination. It causes me to stop and think. It's not a book to read quickly. I read it slowly. I've read it 2 or 3 times. I've read it in French and in English. And it's not a book you can breeze through. You really have to pause, because it does get very repetitive, and it's easy to lose your concentration. After a few pages, okay, close it and then read some more and read it out loud. And it's like, then it's a real pleasure. It's a delicacy for the bibliophile, for the book connoisseur.